All right. So, hey, Leah. All right. Oh,
Hi,
did you graduate? When did you graduate?
1999.
1999. Wow.
It's been a few years.
Been a few years. So can you just start by walking us through? Did you do an internship? What did you study here? You did computer information systems?
Yep.
And yes, I don't know, do we have concentrations or anything back then or
I don't think so. I think it was called computer science slash information systems.
right?
And then I did a math minor.
Okay.
Yep. And I did the summer of my junior year, I did an internship with what was Anderson Consulting when I started, and then they turned into Accenture. And I actually got placed. So I was an intern consultant, which is kind of weird, but then I actually got placed at a company called Retech that did retail software. And that was really fun. And I worked with a lot of Retech employees more than I worked with Accenture employees. So what that resulted in was when I graduated, then I got a job offer both from Accenture and from Retech to either just be a full-time employee with Retech or to go and be a consultant with Accenture.
Why don't you talk? We haven't talked too much about what consultants are and what that job is. But again, we still see it. So why don't you uh so talk a little bit like so Anderson consulting job companies like that, they place or they it's not a permanent position, they usually place you. So can you remember like where does it did it involve traveling? How long was a typical placement? I guess you were just an intern, so maybe you don't know, but were you
Right.
so because sometimes you get just placed somewhere for a month and then move somewhere else. Sometimes it's 2 years. So
Yeah. So I'm gonna feel really old now, but that was during like the dot-com boom, right? So Retech actually, I would say, gosh, like 25% of the people that were working at Retech at the time were Accenture consultants. So Retech just didn't have enough staff to do all the work they needed to do. And so the Accenture contracts were really long, like years long. Um, and so that's how it worked there. Now, at my second company I worked at, which was McKesson, we had some consultants too, but those were more short term. Those were maybe like 6 months to a year contracts where we would bring people on just for a particular project. And then as soon as the project was done, we'd reevaluate and see did we actually need the additional people or were we good to let them go? Shoot, I can't hear you. And I don't know if it's me.
sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
I'm in this classroom and it echoes around a little bit on the microphone because you're on four screens here.
Okay.
So yes, so I like, but then I forget I'm on mute. So I'm getting old. Okay, so then you were at Retech and you were doing development there.
Yep, I was a developer and I worked on the data warehouse product. So the data warehouse, I don't know if you've talked about that at all, but basically we extracted all of the data out of the retail system and then we kind of like rearranged it into different formats in the database so that we could more easily run reports off of it to see how we were doing. So generally you wouldn't want to report, you wouldn't keep all your data in your day-to-day retail system because it gets really big and it's not very efficient for reporting. So we extracted all the data out into a data warehouse and then we could do the reporting there. I mostly worked just on the UI for that. And then after that got pretty mature, I moved on to an inventory planning system where we would try to we would let the users input like how much stuff they could put in a truck. And then the system would calculate how to put the stuff in the truck properly or how to replenish the different locations better. And I was there for, I think, 7 years. You're on
And
mute again.
Retech, so for the students who don't know here, really focused on retail stuff. So like Maurice's in town was using Retech and any place that had lots of stores and was managing inventory and trying to get product out to their stores and sell it, right? So that's and so you were talking about a data warehouse. So again, you were tracking day-to-day sales, every time you bought time a customer bought a pair of pants or bought a, salad dressing or whatever the store was, that was a transaction, and you group those together in your data warehouse, or you got those out of the transactional system into a data warehouse at that time, right? So
Yep, yep. And the Retech eventually got bought by Oracle. And I didn't super enjoy working for Oracle. So then I switched industries and I went to McKesson, which is healthcare software. Now, McKesson does more than software. Actually, they're probably the worst at software. They're much better at medical products and drugs and stuff like that. So I lasted there 8 years until our entire office got laid off. But there I worked on a system that let doctors record their notes from the visit. So the hospital could build a template. We made it so the hospital could build a template of all the things they wanted the doctor to record from each patient they saw. And then the doctors would use that template to start a visit note, and they could just click the buttons and it would automatically fill in text for them based on what they clicked, and then spit out a document at the end that would give the note. So one of our main competitors for that product was Epic, which is out of Wisconsin. And I think Epic has survived, and I don't know that the McKesson version of that product has survived.
So can you tell us, what didn't you said you didn't like Oracle very much. And again, so for students who are looking to get, jobs, what should they be kind of looking for, I guess, in companies, and
Yeah.
again, it sounds like maybe McKesson wasn't a great place to work. I don't know if I'm reading that.
No, so I did 7 years at Retech, 8 at
Yeah,
McKesson, and 12 at
right.
Infinite Campus. So I think that's pretty good for only 3 real jobs.
Yeah.
Um, some of the problems with Oracle was they're just so big. And you didn't really, even though we were our own smaller office, we didn't have much say in what Larry Ellison, to be quite honest, was pushing down on us. And so we had to follow the Oracle rules. It it was just big. McKesson, part of the problem with McKesson was we didn't build the system from the ground up. We kept acquiring smaller companies and trying to make all the systems work together. And we had multiple offices, which, by that time we did a lot of video calls and it wasn't that hard to work together remotely, but the culture was very different at some of the offices. And McKesson was better because our office was more autonomous. Even though we were part of a really big company, they weren't forcing as many things on us. The thing I really like about Infinite Campus is we're a small company, we're privately held, so we don't have to worry about what stockholders think. We're profitable. I can't tell you how many calls I sat through at both Oracle for the retail part and at McKesson, where it's like, we didn't make our numbers again. There's not going to be raises. We got to get this out. You got to work overtime. At Infinite Campus, it's not, did we make any money? It's how much money did we make? And it's a really, really good work-life balance at Infinite Campus as well. There might be a crunch time, like a couple times a year where you need to work extra. I guess maybe I'll say like once a quarter, but otherwise it's, if you are communicating with the people who care about the delivery date for the project and you say, you know what, we want to do this right, we're just not going to be able to do it with quality by this date. Can we have one more month? They're usually willing to let you have the extra time to get something done if you can show them, these are the reasons why, and we've been working on this. And, you know, they're very reasonable to work with, but they have more control over it too, because it's our small company. I think we only have like 600, 700 people. So, well, it's small compared to Oracle and McKesson. You're on mute again.
We just talked to two alumni who are working at in Grand Rapids at a small county place, and I think they had almost a dozen, but they weren't all developers. They had almost a dozen people in their little office complex. So Yes, but like you say, it is still, a small feeling when you're at that size, when you're at a couple hundred. So, okay, students, questions? What should we ask Leah about? Should we ask what she does as a developer or tool? Should we ask if she does Scrum or not? What languages? What do you want to know?
What languages are used?
Okay, so let's start with languages. Michael wants to know what languages you use. What if you learned? So you learned Java when you started here.
Yep.
Did you learn
And
any HTML or any web stuff?
tiny bit, right? Like the
Okay.
internet was brand new. I know one of my friends was making fun of me because I said, what am I going to tell them that I learned in college that I still use? And I was like, oh, Photoshop. And she said, you learned Photoshop in college? And I said, you have to remember, we didn't have the internet when I was in high school. So we were not learning things like Photoshop in high school.
Right.
Yeah, so when I was in college, we did Java. I think we started with C++. We did a little bit of HTML. Obviously, it wasn't pertinent at the time, but nowadays, I hope you're doing JavaScript, like real coding in JavaScript. Um, we used what, Microsoft Access for our database, I think, back in the day. Um,
So
yeah,
what do you use now? Or what
right.
have you
So,
how
well,
have you evolved and what did you learn along the way? So
right, it's kind of funny because I'm doing similar things still. So our application is a web application. Now Infinite Campus actually hosts the majority of our schools. So we host their systems on site. So on the client, it's a web client. So it's HTML, and then we're using Angular for the JavaScript. And then on the server, we're using Java. We use Groovy mostly for automated tests. And then we have a REST framework that kind of wraps Hibernate. So that's how we talk to the database. It's our own homegrown. It's supposed to make it easier. Sometimes it makes it worse, but we try. And then we do
so
actually,
Hibernate is that your SQL? Are you running an SQL database or non-SQL
yeah, no,
database?
yeah, we're using SQL Server for the database,
Okay.
which
And
I
so
will,
Hibernate is right, that's an ORM, right?
yeah,
Right. That and you wrap that in did you say a RESTful interface API?
yeah,
Okay. These are all things we're kind of talking about the class, but the class they don't know. I mean,
okay.
so Thursday we're going to try to create our first RESTful API
Oh,
in class there. So that's Thursday's stuff. So that's good there. But we haven't we just talked about ORMs, but they don't know, they have never seen, I don't think they've seen one yet.
okay.
Yeah. But so that's why I want to just point that out to class.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and
And
that's
then okay.
I just say that's really good that you're at least getting an exposure to that in college because obviously we didn't have that back in the day when I would those things didn't exist.
In other words, we didn't teach Leah anything that she uses now.
No, I'm very thankful for the database design courses we had because um, a number of my colleagues, when we started, you didn't need to have a degree in computer science. You could have a degree in anything and they would teach you how to code. And so I have a lot of friends who are like, I wish I would have had that background to draw from so that I actually know, how should I be doing this? Obviously, you can learn along the way, but you usually tend to just look up something on demand, right? You don't tend to like go through the whole process and learn the whole um, foundation of it. So I'm very thankful for that. And I'm thankful for the system development life cycle things that we talked about and went over because also my my coworkers who got a degree in computer science, they got a strict computer science degree. And so they learned how to code and they learned different technologies and how computers work, but they didn't necessarily learn good practices of software engineering. Obviously, they pick them up along the way again, right? But just like coming into a team that's already doing some of those things, I think it's a lot easier to understand, oh, yeah, we're supposed to do a design and we're supposed to code and we're supposed to test. And having that knowledge of, there is kind of an established process that you would go through to have a high quality product is real good.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? So what is your process? We've talked about, again, we still teach this analysis design. We talk about the waterfall methods. We talk in design documents. We also talk a lot about agile and Scrum and that sort of stuff. So what kind of methodologies have you used and use now? And which ones do you like?
Sure. So I'd say at Retech we were waterfall. At McKesson, we started out very waterfall. McKesson was the first time I learned Agile and Scrum. And I think some parts of that we got very good at. I think we got very good at planning a project and having different teams and different products planned together to plan a release. We did things like we had Scrum of Scrums, where actually teams would get together and talk about blockers and things they needed from each other. And I think we did retrospectives. I would say that is actually where we were the best at Agile or Scrum. When I came to Infinite Campus, it was very disorganized. I would say probably about 7 years ago, we went through Agile and Scrum training and we started implementing it. And our managers were pretty good in that they let us implement it for each team for what worked for us, which is really what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to follow the tenets, but figure out what works for your group of people, how you work best together. And so we did that. And my team especially has gotten to a real good flow, a real good cadence. I would say we either deliver what we say on the date or within one release of the date. So to me, that's pretty good. And we have very few bugs that come back from my team. Now, unfortunately, we've got a big company coming in, and some other teams who weren't doing things agilely decided to go through some training and implement things. And now they're trying to make us all do things the same. So now we have to go back and oh, now we gotta do this again, and now we gotta do that again. And I think we'll get there eventually, but I think the biggest thing to take away from Agile and Scrum is you're supposed to keep improving, but if things just aren't giving you any value, if they really aren't giving you any value, truly, don't just be like, oh, this isn't fun, I don't want to do it. But adjust your process, right? Because it doesn't need to be the same for every team, as long as you're continually iterating on what you're building and how you're working. That's really the whole point of it.
So if you're doing some now, what are you doing? 2-week sprints? Are you doing daily stand-ups? Are you doing reflections? We tell them all this stuff because it's really hard for us to do that because we can't do daily stand-ups in a class that meets twice a week, so.
Right.
So,
yeah,
which of all these components do you do in your team?
We do daily stand-ups. We do 2-week sprints. We recently started setting real goals on our sprints instead of funny ones, get this other team to fix this bug or something. So we're trying to actually plan our sprints to meet our goals. We do a sprint review. One of the challenges we have is that we have so many teams and so much that we want to share with our stakeholders that we try to combine it to one meeting with a whole bunch of teams talking and presenting. The challenge we have with that is we don't always get good feedback from our stakeholders because the group is so large and people are afraid to speak up or take time. So my team has tried to pause longer so that people can break in with questions and frequently ask for questions to try to get more feedback that way. One thing we're not doing right now is retrospectives because nobody likes retrospectives, but we'll have to start doing them again or we can't check off the box that we're doing Scrum. What am I missing?
Do you do story points? How do you measure your features? And do you do user stories? Do you have a backlog? Is that kind of standard?
We have a backlog. We don't have user stories in a user story format. I would say we're good at breaking down the work into small enough chunks that are testable so that maybe it only takes a few days to code something and then it can be passed to the tester, but they're not written at as a teacher, I do this. We started out doing that. We got away from it. I
still haven't found anyone that does user stories like I teach them, and it's just bumming me out.
I can tell you that the teams that went through the training recently do the user stories that way.
Yeah, everyone does it when you learn
Yeah,
it. And then after 2 years of doing this, you just write out your user stories in a
yeah,
meaningful format.
yeah.
Okay.
We do estimates. They are story points. However, so we use the Fibonacci sequence mostly. But I would say they're roughly equivalent to days. So they're not true story points, right? Because story points are not supposed to be equal to any set number of hours. Um, but I guess it still lets us see the comparable sizes between the units of work. So in that respect, it's still helpful.
Okay, students, another question. What are you interested in knowing? Want to know about her work life? She's saying she has work-life balance now, flex, work from home. What else do you want to know? Do you want to know tools? What her, oh, yeah, you've worked with any interns in your company? That's a good question. Talk to me about that up there. So first, let's
Um,
do that one.
yes, at my current company, we do regularly hire interns. Um, this the hard part for the company hiring the intern is you really have to have at least one person who has the time to devote to helping the intern. And so we found that when we have projects that are on tight timelines, it's hard for us to incorporate interns into that because we tend to ignore them and not give them the help that they need. Um, I would say like 7 years ago when we didn't have really tight deliverables, we did a very good job of hiring and working with interns, and most of them became full-time employees. Lately, my department has just kind of stopped just because we haven't been given the freedom to pick the end date of our project. Did you guys talk about the three parts of a project management pyramid, right? So you have resources, time, and scope. And you can adjust any of those to get the project done on time. Unfortunately, time is usually the one you don't get to adjust. So you can either add more people to the project or you can cut scope. But if they say, like right now, we have a project that's supposed to be done by fall, well, we're taking December 21st as the end of fall. So we're not done with it yet. So I would say that when we look to hire interns, my current company is way more picky than, for example, when I got hired as an intern. My current company wants you to be working on something outside of your schoolwork and your school projects. So they want to see that you've done something on your own, that you've made a website for somebody, or you are interested in some technology that you learned about and you built something. So if you're doing any of those kind of things, that's going to look really good for getting hired as an intern. I can't say if all companies are that picky. I can just say that that's how ours currently is.
Right. Other questions for Leah? Yes, David?
For training programs instead of extracurricular projects.
So yeah, what about training? So like rather than doing a project, what if students do some, complete an online, free course or something like that? Have you seen that sort of stuff?
I would say that's definitely helpful. Yeah. Like I said, it's been a while since we've interviewed for an intern. Now, that's not to say that other departments in our company aren't still hiring interns, because we do frequently hire people that were interns in other areas as full-time employees
Right.
in ours.
Yeah, I've seen interns at Infinite Campus posted. How with new employees, how do you do training or how do you do onboarding or whatever you call it, for a new developer?
So we actually have it's we're getting better at documenting the steps. We have a very convoluted setup for your development environment. So the biggest part is getting your development environment set up. And then we've always been very SQL heavy. And so I didn't actually say we do use SQL Server for the database, which I personally really like because I can take a backup of any database and spin it up locally. And it's so nice because I don't need a DBA to do things for me to make changes to a database. So we have a bunch of SQL training queries that we make new employees do. And then you have an existing employee that's assigned to like help you work through them. And then we kind of just put you on a project. We try to give you little things to start with, and you're supposed to have a mentor. I can say we're not real good at that on my team. We keep trying. We tried different things.
Right.
One time we tried putting all the new people on one team and then having them do a whole bunch of bugs. The problem was they were going through all these bugs really fast and we couldn't keep up and we didn't have enough people to test them and we weren't checking if they were doing them right. So then we thought, oh, we'll give them these screens to rewrite into a more modern technology. I think really we should put one new person in each team so that we have multiple people that can help them instead of putting them on a team by themselves.
Yeah.
But I'm not the manager, so I don't get to make that call.
Okay, other questions for Leah? Yes.
How was the transition?
So, yeah, so you didn't learn, we didn't teach you JavaScript and the languages you're using here. How was the transition? How did you learn the new technologies? Is that right? So what kind of, yeah,
Well, I mean, if you know Java, you can write JavaScript, right? And Stack Overflow is your best friend. And usually, unless you're building something completely brand new, there's going to be something that somebody has already written that's very similar to what you're trying to do. So you learn a lot just by looking at the existing code that you're adding onto. And then you can pretty much look up the rest. Let me think if I've ever actually been given time to take a training on a language. I don't think so. So, but if you know how to code, you know how to code. Now, like Hibernate is something weird that's harder to learn, right? JavaScript, not a big deal. Java to C++, not a big deal. And most of it, I think you can pick up by looking at the existing code, or there's probably somebody on your team that's very good at it, or you just Google it. I mean,
how about AI? One of our students is asking, so are you using AI to help, instead of Stack Overflow at times, or what's your company's stance on AI as a developer?
I don't think we have a stance. I don't honestly know of anybody using it to write code. We want to use some forms of it because the industry I'm in now is K through 12 information systems and learning. What does LMS stand for? Learning something system.
Yeah.
So what we would actually like to use AI in our product to help us generate, like if a student does well on this assignment, what's the next assignment that we should give them? Or our whole goal right now is agile learning for students, actually, so that you would be put into a group with other students. You'd be given a project specific to the students, the level that they're at currently, to keep them moving forward. And the whole class doesn't all have to have the same. I know, Tom, this is a nightmare for you, right? The same assignments and the same projects at the same time. So I think we're looking more to use AI in the product that we're building versus for building the product. I don't know of anybody that's used it to try to write code. Well, I'm sorry, my 14-year-old son has, but nobody that I work with.
Interesting. There. Maybe one more question for Leah as we wrap up here.
What sort of features is she working on?
Okay, so what sort of features, are you working on currently? So what, give us an example of like a typical, thing. Is it bug fixes? Is it a new feature? What is it?
Yep. So right now my team is working on, so my team, we kind of specialize in grading. So we kind of own the teacher's grade book and all the setup of that, so that like the district can push down the grading setup. Here's all the standards you have to grade on. Here's how you should set up your grade book. And then we also do a little bit on the portal too. So things that would show for the parent portal or the student portal. Currently, we're working on basically it's like a discussion, but it's at the section or class level. So the teacher can post for all the kids in the section and the kids can respond to it. And we're mostly viewing it as like the teachers like giving announcements of what's going to happen, and the kids can ask questions about it. So we have to let the teacher, do the post and the kids reply, and we're doing it so you can upload files to it, and they can be inline or they can be ones you have to download. Eventually, we want to do it so that the teacher could post only to specific students. That way, that's what my team's working on. Some of my friends are working on accessibility for the portal. So we have to make sure that a screen reader can read everything that's on the portal, and that a blind person can understand what's going on based on the way that we've coded it. And that's actually really hard. There's not a lot of good examples of how to do things properly, and screen readers are kind of crazy. And I'd much rather be building the feed for the teacher and the students. Our next project is going to be that right now teachers can create assignments that are for that particular class, right? That section of the course. And we're going to let teachers create assignments that aren't attached to anything. And then they'll be able to put them in whatever class they want later. So they'll kind of be able to build up their own little curriculum library and use it then as they see fit, or share it with other teachers without having to give it to students in order to get it created.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks for talking to us. We always appreciate hearing, well, I always appreciate when the students aren't sleeping. So that's really good there. So thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, it was good to see you.
Yes. Okay, let's say bye to Leah. Okay, we'll see you later.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up.